a very warm welcome to all the esteemed panelists and as well as all the participants. Um, with that, I will probably start my presentation and share my screen. Right. I think as Priyakshi also alluded, I'm going to take you through some of the kind of recent, in the sense, findings of from the sector itself, and nothing so much of analysis, but more of representation of facts and figures and where the industry is heading. And along with that, of course, who are the prominent players who are making a mark in this particular overall ecosystem. So with that, I think the agenda is will cover the global landscape and then come to specifically focus on India battery market landscape and then ACC manufacturing. Yeah, that's where the focus of manufacturing is all about. And then I think there are a couple of other um, priorities set by the government to look at how to set up overall ecosystem or promote the overall ecosystem by focusing on the component manufacturing as well. And then lastly, conclusion and probably the way forward or the recommendations of the way forward. So I think we all know that there is a lot of noise about batteries, both from the EV sector as well as the stationary storage, which is the larger um, uh, or the larger of the stationary share will come from the power sector itself because of the renewables onset, right? So these are the two kind of demand. And then there is consumer electronics, which is, of course, growing and always will grow at a much faster pace. But the large megawatt hour demand will always, or gigawatt hour demand will always come from the vehicular growth, and which is primarily transition from the ICE vehicles to the EVs. Now, if you see the current demand or the 2023 demand, which is actual demand met in that sense, was somewhere around 950 gigawatt hour. But if you see the projections of 2025, which is somewhere around 1600 gigawatt hour, and then 2030 would be 3700 or 3700 to 4100 gigawatt hour by 2030, and that would be the overall demand. Now, 85% of that will come from the mobility applications, right? So that's what is estimated, as I said. Of course, there is a big concern about some of the jurisdictions or some of the geographies are kind of have a renewed focus, if I may put that way, on how the transition is happening, and EVs are in a way not getting pushed. But I think the longer term view is that and the transport transition will happen through EVs itself. That's the only way you can actually transition to a net zero kind of a scenario on transport. And mostly the technologies have been stabilized. The costs have become more or less at par in certain geographies as well. And yeah, I think it will happen over a period of time. Maybe there is a sluggish behavior in the couple of years as we see, but it will pick up in the longer term. And by 2030, this demand will be achieved and probably it will be surpassed, right? So that's the kind of outlook what we have. And this is not something by Deloitte Outlook. This has been supported by most of all the other analysts as well. And more or less the numbers are converging to somewhere around 4.1 to 6,000, 4,100 to 6,000 gigawatt hour. That's the range which can happen, right? Now, out of this overall demand, China will continue to lead the global battery demand itself. So, even if you see that Norway has almost transited to EVs, but the I'm saying the overall demand, or South Korea or anywhere else, the share of demand will be, of course, low when it compares to China or larger countries like US and India. So therefore, China continues to be kind of say contributing to the larger maximum share of 40-45% or 50% of the share, right? Now, if you see, I think one of the cases whoever lives in the NCR belt, and we are all struggling with pollution and other things. What you've seen, I think Beijing a couple of years back also, where we're struggling with the similar kind of a construct and pollution. And what led to the complete transition is one of the mandates was ZEV mandates itself. And there is a lot of policy advocacy going on in the NCR belt itself to bring in such mandates. So those are transitioning, which might, of course, impact a lot of EV cells, and therefore policy pushes are also required in that way. Um, Now, if you see on the supply side, somewhere around so to meet the demand, as I said, 2200 gigawatt hour of battery cell manufacturing capacity was there in 2023. Now, all of it almost, as I said, 98% of the battery cell production capacity is in Asia itself, and almost 60% of the overall production happened in China, dominated by two, three players worldwide, as I said, CATL, BYD, CALB, Oceans of the world, and all. They dominate the overall production, and they have multiple facilities across the world as well. Therefore, as I said, the consolidated production and supply chain is still pretty skewed towards China. Now, I think this gives you a overall kind of on the right hand side, the block chart gives you a overall distribution of the gigawatt hour capacities, what's there in China versus Korea versus Japan, and the rest of it is Europe. So that's a good thing. Of course, the Asia is, of course, as I said, is the strongest position, which holds or the key to the serving the energy needs of the world. But at the same time, when I say that, there is a larger concern that most of it is in again centering around China. So more from that perspective, we need to diversify across the Asian belt, and India is one of the alternatives, if I may say, to China, which can have a similar kind of ecosystem play if there are right private and as well as public partnership. Now, if you see the value chain, which is mining, refining, cell components, cell manufacturing, pack manufacturing, reuse, and recycle, and the red ones is not the warning signals, but this is primarily saying that a lot of it is, of course, dependent or rather dominated by China. If you see, most of the value capture in that sense is being done by China, and they usually control the entire supply chain, the price, all of it. So the sell prices are at rock bottom. The sell prices can go up with a little bit of a control on the mining, refining, production, all of it. And that's also being regulated by the Chinese. So therefore, all the entire value chain, when country and the world is actually dependent on storage for their energy needs. So that's becoming a critical component aside alike and think of an alternative ecosystem as well, right? Um, Now, let's focus on India when I speak about the world itself. India, of course, the start was pretty robust. We almost like more from the EV perspective, two-wheelers, three-wheelers had achieved a tremendous growth. And the similar outlook is still prevails, of course, over a longer period of time. And a kind of as I said, millions of EVs sold on a projected basis. This is something which we did for the government of India, net zero strategy itself. And transport transition, if I call out, if you see to reach a net zero, you will need somewhere around from a 1.7 million number of EVs to 76.4 million EVs, right? And across, of course, categories of vehicles. And that would fetch a demand in terms of overall say gigawatt hour. That's the next slide. But on the right hand side, similarly, more from a 2050 perspective, what's the kind of renewables which is required and the storage which is required is projected on the right inside, right? So when you have EVs as a transport transition and when you have renewables as a overall green power transition, automatically storages are something which is unavoidable, right? So therefore, more from that perspective, the demand comes from these two sectors. And if you broadly plot these numbers, you'll see somewhere around you will achieve a 45% CAGR year on year on a from a 2022 to 2030, right? That's the kind of scale of growth which is kind of expected. 2025, we will have 43 gigawatt hour, and 2030, you will have 205 gigawatt hour, out of which 74%, 150 gigawatt hour is from the EVs. Stationary would be 40 gigawatt hour. The recent projections of CA is somewhere around 50 plus or 56 gigawatt hour. So as I said, so these are some of the positives which we see. And the prices are also of the batteries also kind of enabling that, right? So we are seeing a record low prices, and that's supposedly to be continued for the next couple of years at least. Right. Now, with that, we have seen a slew of initiatives and as well as kind of, in the sense, policies, regulations, and schemes and other things from Government of India, both the central government and the state government. The central government initiatives, which are some of the keys, of course, the PLI scheme for ACC battery. We also have the PME Drive scheme, which is the subsidy continuance and the focus around e-buses, ambulances, all of that. Custom duty waiver for critical minerals. Then state government initiatives are special benefits for ACC and component manufacturing, state industrial policies, sector-specific policies, and then demand-side incentives is energy storage obligation. We have even ESO is not being followed, but at least what we are seeing is there are VGF components or viability gap funding, which is already been identified for 5 renewable rich states, and we are seeing several tenders also by SECI and others promoting battery storage kind of um, um, procurements, right? So waiver of road tax and registration fees, interest subvention on loans for purchase of EVs, and several of the multilateral banks and other development banks are also kind of coming out with new financial instruments, right? Uh, so with that, what we are suggesting is, of course, that more from a value capture perspective, we have seen the private investment mostly centered around the cell manufacturing and to happen and to do a kind of a value capture for almost 50-60%, you will need cell components of 20 cell components also to be domestically kind of harvested, right? So that's the percent of the value capture, and then refining and mining and pack manufacturing, reuse and recycle also holds the rest of it. Of course, we have a lot of pack manufacturing focused in the last couple of years. We've seen several large corporations also focusing and investing in pack manufacturing, which was also earlier coming from China, but that's 18% is something which we are now focusing. Cell manufacturing recently started, and then come cell components, of course. I see my friends and colleagues already participating in the panel, so they will be speaking more about that. But that's also something where India is focusing, and thanks to the private sector and industry corporation, that they are already thinking of investing large amounts of capital in that. But of course, there are asks from the government, which the government needs to probably facilitate, so that there is a strong ecosystem being managed over here. Now, these are announcements, pretty large. I think somebody can Google it out. We have just Googled it out and then pasted over here. They are kind of a network mapping in India's map where the facilities are coming. So 150 gigawatt hour ACC is already been announced, though there is a overall, I would say, PLI scheme only for 50 gigawatt hour, but we already seen announcements of 150. So that's the kind of positivity and I would say uh, belief in India's growth is there amongst the private sector that they have already announced and they're seriously thinking of putting facilities over here. A lot of it is also talking about the same thing as I previously outlined. China is the only country and India is probably a probable location where some of the other countries in the West are looking for an alternative. So a lot of it will not be only for domestic demand, but therefore a lot of it will also be for import. And if you see, most of these facilities are coming where there are port facilities like the southern states and as well as the western states. If you see, that's where the maximum facilities are kind of located. That's because the ports are there. So if you see Tamil Nadu, the Chennai port and I think the Maharashtra, one of the Maharashtra ports are almost have 90% of presence today, where all the imports are happening. Um, Now, these are some of the and this is not announcements. So as you see, so 2.6 gigawatt hour has already reached in advance stage where some kind of a sale output has already been achieved, and I would say commissioning has taken place, and 20 gigawatt hour of similar facilities are already under construction. So that itself is a pretty strong number in that sense going towards. So yeah, I think that's commendable. And some of the corporations are like Ola, 1.4 gigawatt hour. We have Reliance, which is under PLI 5 hour. And the company targets to set up 30 gigawatt hour. Rajesh Exports, again, PLI. Nash Energy, outside of PLI, they have already commissioned 600 megawatt hour of cylindrical LFP, which is there. Ensure, again, outside the PLI, has already commissioned 600 megawatt hour of pilot line and expanding to 1.5 gigawatt hour. Excite, again, outside PLI, 6 gigawatt hour of first phase in Bangalore, currently under construction. Amara Raja, outside PLI, again, construction of its initial 2 gigawatt hour. And Agrata is also primarily for their Jaguar engine as well as outside exports for their vehicle, right? So that's something there. And then on the technology, I think out of all the investments taking place, what we are seeing is more than 60% of the cells are manufactured to be in India will be LFP. Some of the other technologies are sodium ion, which Reliance, of course, earlier, probably 3, 4 years down the line, before they had acquired Faradian, they wanted to set this up, but I'm not sure about the exact progress on that. But yeah, I think that's one of the technologies which of course BYDs of the world or Seattle's of the world is also kind of experimenting. Then there are other technologies like semi-solid lithium ion 24 and all, LTP, NMC is of course anyway there. So that's primarily on the technology and yeah, I think this is broadly to talk about the costing elements. As I said, cell components and cell manufacturing itself. If you see, captures somewhere around 60% of the overall cost, overall value. Now, if you deep dive into the costing elements of it or the cost distribution between the cell components and cell manufacturing, you will see cathode, anode, separator, electrolyte, foil, and battery cell. And on an overall cell perspective, so 50 to 55% would be cathode materials, anode material would be 14 to 16%, separator will be 10 to 12%, electrolyte 8 to 10%. And that comprises the overall battery costs. Now, if you just do a projections, then how much of cathode is required going forward? So capacity required by 2030 is already being projected, whereas the current capacity based on whatever today exists is somewhere around very, very minimal. As I said, very, very minimal localization has happened. So there's a lot of space to expand and a lot of investments are supposedly to come at this space. And this particular webinar is talking about or is aimed to speak about that. And we'll learn a lot from each of the panelists as well. That what are their kind of focus area and what kind of investments they are planning or expansion plans they have. So yeah, I think with that, most of them are known to all of us. So Altman, yeah, I will hear shortly from him. Loham, Himadri, Epsilon. So again, Mr. Nanda is also there. So yeah, I think these are non-exhaustive, as I said, but a lot of expansion plans is already on the way, and we are excited to see what are their plans. So over to you with that. I think we have a list of cathode investments, anode investments, electrolyte. We also have Neogen over here. So we are going to hear from Neogen as also on their plans to expand. And then foil, of course, is a larger player where Aditya Birla is already kind of setting up their or planning to set up their investments. So yeah, I think so with all the excitement, I hand it over back to the organizers. Thank you for this opportunity, and if you have any questions from the audience, we'll be happy to take it up at the end of the webinar. Thank you.